From painting to photography, from beadwork to woodworking, KQAL-FM on the campus of Winona State University presents Art Beat. Art Beat highlights the work and accomplishments of local artists from in and around Winona. Support for Art Beat is made possible by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund.
Today on Art Beat, we take you back to the 2024 International Digital Media and Arts Association Conference and Exhibition on the campus of Winona State University. The International Digital Media and Arts Association, or IDMAa, is dedicated to showcasing new ideas and innovative developments within digital arts and digital media. This year's conference and exhibition focuses on the theme of wild media. This week on Art Beat, we sit down with Laura Shackelford and Patrich Lichty about their workshops at this year's IDMAa conference. Laura Shackelford is a professor for the Department of English and the director for the Center for Endangered Storycraft at Rochester Institute of Technology in Rochester, New York. Patrich Lichty is a professor in the Mass Communications Department here at Winona State University. I'm Abby Hockey, inviting you to join me as we talk with Laura Shackelford and Patrich Lichty on Art Beat. I'm Abby Hockey. I'm here with Laura Shackelford. How are you doing today?
I'm great. I've been enjoying Winona, Minnesota, and this conference has been really exciting. A lot of interesting work, so I'm happy.
So first of all, you have one of the most nature/wilderness connected media presentations here. Why do you think that is?
I think I've worked in digital literature and narrative studies for a long time, but I think especially with the pandemic and just all the challenges that are going on right now, I value more and more my connection to plants and trees and the kind of regeneration and just relaxation they provide. So that's just a direction that I think a lot of scholars are turning today. People talk about it as an arboreal or vegetative turn in cultural studies. And so if you think of in the media, you see all the references to leaves and plants. And I think there's just a lot of desire to sort of get back to some of those connections we have with our physical environment, even in cities, because they make us feel better. And, indulging myself in that, with my research. It's really fun for me.
Yeah, and you're also doing something you're passionate about, which I always love seeing. Do you think that, or do you believe that we could help feed more people and kind of lessen the amount of food deserts if we bring back actual fruit-bearing trees?
Yeah, since the 19th century, urban planners have gotten rid of fruit-bearing trees, largely because, like ginkgo trees, they have this really stinky, awful fruit. Mm-hmm. It makes a mess. So it makes sense why it's cleaner to have sterile trees that don't produce fruit. Pear trees also are really beautiful, and they've eliminated the fruit. But I think, looking back on that now, it seems to make sense that in our parks, in our neighborhoods, that there are opportunities to have fruit. And I know there are other cities where they have web-based networks or websites where they advertise when they have surplus fruit. Mm-hmm. So if you have a garden, you have a pear tree or an apple tree, you just put up a little notice and people will come, harvest that. And so I feel like there's a lot of opportunity just to remind people that our food comes from, in this case, fruit comes from trees, and we can grow those. And we can also just think about ways to make the food system work for people more efficiently rather than work for companies. I think there are a lot of different ways to do that. I don't think having fruit trees in our yards is going to solve the problem. Mm-hmm. And I certainly am not a person who's a homesteader. I don't want to go back to a point where I have to make all my own food. Yeah. I'm just not that devoted, and I think there's a good place for orchards and a good place for grocery stores. Mm-hmm. But I feel like, especially young people today are so alienated from food systems. They don't even realize that there are choices, And so just growing, realizing you can take a seed and plant it and you have lettuce, or you can plant an apple tree pretty easily in your yard. With a little bit of knowledge, you can have fresh fruit. Just opens up the sense that we can really make our food systems more equitable, healthier, and actually enjoy it, have fun, and connect with people over that.
Yeah. Just going back to the food deserts and the fact that they are, they pop up a lot of the time in places in which there's a lot of poverty, and there's a lot of, there's just so much like racism in the structure and things like that. Do you think that fruit trees are just adding more nature around those areas, that it might, if not help, at least give them more of a chance or a betterment of their community?
Definitely. And I think that's the community garden movement is working in that direction. I mean, if you look at the history of in Rochester, New York, and across the U.S. of redlining practices where minorities were excluded from neighborhoods that were desirable or had more economic opportunities, and tended to be segregated into lower income, less desirable parts of the city, often areas where there's industrial pollution. And what they found in Rochester, New York, and they're trying to do something about now, is that there's actually a difference in the tree canopy. So there are very few trees in these poor urban neighborhoods, in part because money hasn't been invested, but I think also because people in those neighborhoods have learned that they're not valued, and they don't value that neighborhood, right? Because it's a place you want to escape. You don't want to spend time there. You don't want to be outside there. And sometimes it's really genuinely not safe. Yeah. And what researchers have found recently is that the biodiversity of birds is even like completely lacking in those neighborhoods that don't have trees. And so, you know, it's a little bit utopian, but I also think there's a very practical element to bringing back community gardens or teaching young people that they can plant or care for the trees that are in their neighborhood, and they can, you know, have a different relationship to the outdoors, and that should be a basic right of anybody in a city. It shouldn't be confined to people who live in wealthy neighborhoods who get more of the resources.
Yeah. Is there anything like specific, other than things that you've already said, that you hope that people have gotten or, you know, will eventually get from your presentation today?
You know, I think it's just that the sort of, hopefully from the story, some of the story about my own experience with my apple tree, is just how, you know, a very simple thing that you're doing in your life, it can be a very small thing. I think when we think of, you know, environmental climate change and the kinds of problems our society is facing, it seems overwhelming, huge. But I think my apple tree is just an example. It was something my sister gave to me. Yeah. I didn't pursue this, but it's open on to questions, you know, of food scarcity, of public space, of, you know, animals sharing the fruit with other animals and neighbors. And so, you know, I hope that people realize just taking like little baby steps, any little thing you can do in your life to try to improve, you know, the environment or your experience of the outside, can open up into things that really transform a larger community and give other people joy, and help you connect with other people and connect with the natural world. So I've made a lot of unexpected friends, and I've met a lot of animals I didn't expect through this. And so I feel like that's an opportunity that everybody should have. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. I'm Abby Hockey. I'm here talking with Laura Shackelford, and thank you very much. I hope that conference went well and that you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you. I'm so grateful to come to Winona. It's gorgeous. So you are very lucky to have this beautiful environment.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks again to Laura Shackelford. Now, let's hear from Patrich Lichty, who did a presentation titled The Phenomenology of AI Post-Photography, the Semiotics of Versions, Platforms, and Database Dynamics. I am Abby Hockey. I am here with Patrich Lichty. First of all, would you like to introduce yourself and profession and things like that?
Yeah. Hi, my name is Patrich Lichty. I'm an assistant professor of creative digital media and mass communication here at Winona State. I've had a number of careers, but I'm best known as a writer on digital culture and a media artist for probably about 3+ decades. And I was talking at the International Digital Media Association this weekend. I think that's what we're going to talk about.
Yes, it is. So going into that, first thing I want to ask is, you talked about AI and post-photography. What would you define post-photography to be?
Well, I think, if we understand post-photography, we need to think about photography, and there are a couple different ways that we can look at the idea of post. So say, for example, there's a friend of mine, Marissa Olson, talking about post-internet art. She talks about the idea that post-internet art is art that is created, from a sensibility that has arisen after the rise of the internet. And so I have a little bit different, idea of things. So in my talk, I talked about how photography kind of supplanted painting. Like, what was the function of painting? It was for portraits, landscapes, things like that, things that we now use a camera for, or our iPhones or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so, with the camera, it was plate photography. It was very expensive. It was really, technical. But about turn of the century, Eastman Kodak came up with a consumer model of a camera that used film called the Brownie. It got snapshots down to like a buck a piece, which was quite different. And that we wind up with this democratization of media. And then what I'm kind of saying with post photography, this usually talks about photography after digital media. Like I had a wristwatch camera. We've got cameras on our phones. We've got we have surveillance cameras. And the thing that I'm kind of talking about now is that you have like almost what a colleague of mine calls the space of total photography, total imaging. The thing is, though, is that we also have things like drones and surveillance cams and robot dogs running around with cameras on them, that are taking photos, what they call operational images, which are basically not for human beings. Mm-hmm. They're for machines to use or whatnot. And then after that, I'm kind of saying we have images now that are basically computer filtered and created images, based off of like billions of other images. And this is AI. So the thing is that we're creating these images which refer to the photographic, that are these, algorithmic compositions of billions of other images, and to me, I think this is something that is an imaging which speaks to photography, and but isn't. It's passed beyond. So this is what I kind of talk about is, like AI as a form of post photography.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the thing is, I usually say it's either imaging after the use of film, and then that's one definition. And the other definition is saying that things that point towards imaging that points towards photography, that's clearly after the notion of the lens.
Yeah. There's like multiple definitions of post photography, mm-hmm. and things that fall into the realm of post photography. And one of those things right now is AI. Another thing I wanted to ask you about is we have, as humans, after, religion, things like that sort of took hold, think of, like nudity and the human body to be this thing that we program things to steer clear of. In terms of, rendering images of and stuff like
mm-hmm.
that. Yet we allow it to produce images containing, like, bombs destroying villages or
mm-hmm.
forests full of wildlife. How do you feel about that? Do you think that that is something that we should see as, maybe program AI to, stop producing as many images of, or?
Well, I mean, this is what OpenAI and AI producers have been calling this idea of cultural alignment. And this is a very difficult subject for me because of the fact that before I came here, I taught for close to a decade in the United Arab Emirates, which in itself, had a different set of moral contexts and that sort of thing, being under progressive Islam. And so, coming back to the United States, you have a situation, in which media is hypersexualized. And, so on one hand, the things that, portray, sexuality probably aren't actually as bad as a lot of the things that are, that you already do see. But I kind of say, well, I think that I think that there should be modesty and context to all things. In other words, we should have responsibility in all of these things, not just one or two. But there are such things as the First Amendment, which, by the way, does exist all over the world, and and I think that there's also the choice as to whether we choose to abuse it or not. I think how content is produced through its use, is a moral and ethical, question. And it's kind of interesting is that, how do you produce it through Midjourney versus DALL-E versus, it's all through, all through the Adobe platform now. So in other words, I think it's very interesting to think about, what engines and what databases, create what images under what context. And I think this is something we're definitely sorting out.
Yeah. Should there be a level of understanding in people about, life and the value of imperfections before we allow them to use AI for photography purposes?
Could you be a little clearer on that?
In terms of, because one of the beautiful things about like photography and media and things like that is the fact that as humans we are imperfect, so the things that we create are not always perfect themselves. Yet we are using AI to kind of
to create people with six fingers.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
So it there's a difference between thinking about whether AI should be strictly used for realism or the one thing I love about AI is the sense of surprise. So in my classes I'm going forward, I think it's really interesting to use artificial intelligence in creative media as a form of things like brainstorming, pre-visualization, things like that, to kind of get you off of. I think that there's a range. I think there's some students who might use it a bit of a crutch, but also on the other ones, I think may use it as a bit of a spark. So I think this is fine as long as you're, not. I think if you're not using it in too constraining of a way, and this is getting in the idea of like something has to be this way, something has to be perfect in such a way. I think you're absolutely right in that we should be celebrating celebrating the imperfect, and celebrating the little flaws in things, and and that's life. So say for example in Japanese culture, they celebrate the broken, right? So there's this thing called kintsugi. Is you break a bowl, and what happens? You put it back together, but the glue is you make it out of gold and glue. And so the thing is that you put this thing together, and you have these little gold cracks, in the bowl, and it's beautiful. So the thing is, it shows that you've cared for the bowl, and you're taking care of it, and it shows that you spent time together. I think at the end of the day, things like art express the life which is lived, and I think what we have to do as artists and storytellers. We have to celebrate, the lives we live and the stories that we tell one another, to share that experience. And I think that, if we can do that through artificial intelligence, I think that's great.
I guess what my last question would be is, what do you hope that the wider audience takes away from your presentation, from your topic?
Okay, I should probably talk about what it was, actually.
Yeah.
What I talked about at the IDMAa. What happens is that different forms of AI, you basically wind up having with improvements, with revisions. And so you wind up, you type in something, it recognizes what you type differently because, it's something that recognizes language and turns it into parameters, which it sends to the image database, which has different images depending on and different numbers. And so what happens is that, it has different results. So the thing is, what I'm talking about is saying, what can we think about in regards to how our culture is evolving from how we translate, machine translated text to, the images that they create. And I think a lot of times, many people just go and, type in something and they're just looking to get something. And then once they get it, they just walk away. And my thing is like, no, you need to really dig into this thing, and see what kind of, see how deep the rabbit hole goes, because it's a pretty deep rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Because say, for example, Midjourney is operating, I think, off a database of 5.8 billion images. It's pretty big. Yeah. So, the thing is, these things are really huge. And so you have to, consider, that we're dealing with these things that, first of all, are extremely complex. And then the other thing is that sometimes we think that they're thinking. They don't. These things are programs, they're machines. If you test them a little bit, you find out that, they have no sense of, of aesthetics or having lived or any sort of continuity in the imagery or anything like that. It's just basically advanced, data analysis.
Yeah, they don't understand the value and the imperfections of life and stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for talking with me today.
Sure.
I'm Abby Hockey. I am once again here with Patrich Lichty.
That's me.
And thank you again for talking with us. And
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks again to Laura Shackelford and Patrich Lichty for joining us today on Artbeat. To find out more about Patrick's work, go to patrichlichty.com. To learn more about the International Digital Media and Arts Association, go to IDMAa.org. For more conversations on art, tune into Artbeat Tuesdays at 12:30 right here on 89.5 KQAL. For podcasts of Artbeat and other KQAL original programming, go to kqal.org. I'm Abby Hockey, and we've just heard from Laura Shackelford and Patrich Lichty on Artbeat.
Artbeat is written and produced by KQAL-FM on the campus of Winona State University. Visit us on the web at kqal.org.